I'm Susan Hoskins. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, a member of Newtown Friends Meeting, and I've been a professional in the field of aging for the last 20 years. Welcome to part 2 on housing. In this part, we're going to talk about aging in place. AARP did a study a few years ago and found that 87% of people surveyed wanted to remain in their own homes and communities. And that's what we refer to with aging in place. So some ways to do this are to stay in your own home, to downsize to a smaller home or apartment, to move in with family, either in the same home with them or in a separate unit. And we call these accessory dwelling units a mother-in-law apartment, a garage apartment, or even a separate freestanding unit somewhere on the property. Another example is to move into a retirement community, which is independent living, into co-housing, living with a group of people, or into shared housing where you share your home with someone else who needs a home. If you have decided to age in place, there are many services that you may end up needing now or later. And in fact, some of these services you may already be using. First thing I want to talk about is how important it is to have a care coordinator. This might be a professional geriatric care manager. It might be yourself. It might be someone in your family who will connect you with all the services you need when you need them. This might include transportation, home care, volunteer visitors, meals, etc. These are often provided by several different providers and can be a really big job to keep track of. Sometimes a care coordinator has connections with people who do chores, home repairs, shoppers, equipment providers. They know the providers of these services in your area, who's reliable and who isn't. It's best to choose a care coordinator, a professional care coordinator who has a background as a nurse or a social worker or a geriatrician, because they have the professional expertise. So as I said, some of the other services that you may come to need over time include transportation. This may be provided by ride services that we've become familiar with, like Uber and Lyft. It may be family taking turns getting you to appointments, or friends, or in some cases your faith community, your meeting may be able to do that. There may also be a senior transportation service in your community, and you should find out, does that service only provide rides back and forth to the senior center, or do they provide rides anywhere you want to go in the community? Another frequently used service is bill pay or a paperwork manager, someone who's going to manage the medical bills that come in, make sure that your insurance bills are paid on time, and just manage that pile of paperwork that tends to accumulate on your desk. Some people also find that a day program is helpful when you're living at home. So envision a scenario where one partner develops dementia or has Parkinson's, has a lot of needs. It's a big relief to the other partner for that first person to go to a day program, to get picked up by a bus, go to a day program, be involved in the activities, have lunch, and be returned home late in the afternoon. Sometimes those programs also provide things like showering, which can be really daunting for an aging family member with someone with Parkinson's who's not steady on their feet. Using that day program can make it a whole lot easier for you to age in place at home instead of moving into a care community. Another service frequently used is home health care. There are different levels of home health care as well. A companion service can do meals, laundry, shopping, driving, provide companionship. So say a person has dementia and you don't feel safe leaving them home alone, a companion can provide that care service but they're not permitted to provide personal care. They haven't had the training for that. They're not certified or regulated, so it would be important to find out what kinds of training or experience the person has had. The next level is a home health aide. Some of you may know these as certified home health aides or certified healthcare assistants when they're working in a facility. They have been trained and are certified by the state and therefore can do personal care. So what I mean by personal care is they can touch you, they can help you get dressed, they can provide some limited services where they would need to actually touch you, but they cannot do medication. They can remind you that you need to take your medication, but they cannot handle your medication. There are professional home services that some of you may be familiar with. If you had a hip replaced or something, you may have Medicare covered home health for a couple of weeks after you get home. These often include a nurse, an occupational therapist, a speech therapist, and physical therapy. Again, they're provided for a limited amount of time. If you continue to need services after it's been determined that you're not eligible for their services any longer, you would then go to the private pay home health services. Home care, other than that right after the hospital care, home care is paid for either privately out of your pocket, or if you have long-term care insurance, it would begin to pay for that. Home care workers are in your home. Used to be a 4-hour minimum a day. Now some companies will do it for as little as 2 hours a day. So it's important when you're interviewing people to ask what their minimum is. And then there are also live-in home health people who live in your home. You provide meals for them as well. Some of them do drive, but it's important to remember that just because the person is living in their home doesn't mean that they are on call 24/7. So you, your family, and the home health agency or person need to talk about when that person would be on duty, when that person would be off duty. I think we can all understand that a person is not going to provide good care if they've been up for 24 hours. So they need to have 8 hours to sleep. When they're off, like if you say, okay, you have afternoons off between lunchtime and dinner time, that person needs to be able to leave your home and go and do their own personal errands and things during that time. State labor departments have become increasingly concerned about abuse of that policy. One of the other things that people ask about often is using an agency versus private pay. Many people are aware that an agency takes a chunk of the hourly rate for their own purposes, their own pay. The aide herself doesn't get as much, so they want to go private pay. I usually recommend that people use an agency because there's someone who runs that franchise. They check the experience, the background checks, they make the matches, they screen the person. Most of the home health care companies have a mandatory number of training hours for all of their employees. They oversee the caregivers. There's a nurse on staff who supervises all of the caregivers. They're bonded. So those are things that are hard to replace when you go private pay. Also, one of the big differences is that if you use a company, an agency, if your caregiver can't show up, her car broke down, somebody in the family is sick, then the agency needs to provide a substitute. If you're doing private pay, you're paying directly to the provider. You must pay the employment taxes, the workers' comp, you must do the screening, and you end up providing the backup coverage if they can't come. The positive of that is that the full amount goes to the care worker. Be wary. I also caution, be wary of brokers on online matching services. There is a website that people can just post their profile on, and you can go and pick the person you want. It may work out really well. I've known people that were really happy with the folks they found on that website, but understand the responsibilities and the risks of choosing someone with that kind of a service. Today, in the pandemic world, home health care is a consideration that people think about. There are pluses and minuses here too. You want to know how many other clients is that person seeing. So if you go, oh wow, I'm only going to do 2 hours a day, maybe then that care provider has to visit 5 other people. Is that what you want, or do you want that person only coming to you? What are the kinds of protections that that agency is using for their workers? So again, one of the things, if you hire home health care instead of, like in a care community, an assisted living community, you have a ratio of 1 caregiver to 8 or 10 or 12 residents. So that person has to pay attention to a lot of people. And if you decide you want to get up and get dressed at 10 o'clock in the morning, that aide may have other things to do at 10 o'clock in the morning, or may have 5 other residents who also want to get up at 10 o'clock in the morning. If you have your own aide, then you can schedule and say, I want to get up at 10 o'clock in the morning. And that person, for their 2 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours, is only focused on your needs. So those are some of the other kinds of things to think about with home health care. I want to move on now to talk about one of the other things to think about if you're choosing to live in your own home, and that is home modifications and technology. We call this universal design. It's a term that comes from architects. The idea being that if a home is designed consistent with universal design principles, it can be lived in by anybody, a person with a disability, an aging adult, a family with a young child. Both of these both technology and modifications, make your home safer and easier to live in. Remember that falls is the #1 risk factor for aging adults that will change, has the potential for making major changes in your life. So some modifications to consider include putting grab bars in your bathroom, using a lift chair, a lazy boy that has the automatic lift to help you stand up, ensuring that there's good lighting, having safe steps everywhere in the home, removing throw rugs, having hand railings on all of those steps, clearing clutter. And this isn't a mechanical thing, but also taking a look at pets. Pets are often a cause for falls because the cat rubs against your ankles, the dog darts across the room. So think about ways to minimize those risks. Technology. There's lots of technology coming out every day. There's fall detection devices. We all know the ads for the help, I've fallen and I can't get up. Those originally were tied into your telephone system and you couldn't go more than 500 feet from your telephone. Now there are also systems that are tied into your cell phone so you can travel around. There are also more and more of these systems also have a fall detection risk, so that apparently uses the same technology as your airbags in your car, so that if there's sudden movement, it will go off and it will call the company and say, check on this person. There are trackers, so if someone is beginning to wander, but you still want them to have some freedom to move about, there are sneakers that have tracking devices in them. There are iPhones that have trackers. Find My iPhone. There are medication reminding devices, virtual assistants like Alexa, lights that go on automatically, alarms, and more and more and more. But all of those things are making our own homes much safer to live in for longer. So, queries for discussion on this section. Is aging in place a good option for me? What have I heard today that has influenced my thinking? What do I need to work on now so I'll have what I need in place in the future? Again, there's a list of resources for you. I hope this has been informative and that you can now think with an informed mind of where you'd like to live for your remaining years. Thank you for listening.